In this episode, we speak to Rob Lockwood, cybersecurity expert, about hacking, cybercrime, cryptocurrency, and everything you need to know in order to secure your system. We find out about the challenges that arise as code and technology continue to grow into more complex networks and ecosystems. Rob reveals the difficulty in building secure technology, reminding us that secure systems are fruitless if we don't have strong user protocols and accountability. Defining some of the more technical challenges and software capabilities, Rob tells us about zero-day exploits and the importance of patching, before outlining the most important things we as users can do to secure our software and virtual identities. Don't miss today's episode if you want to protect your data and, more importantly, feel secure online. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We're here to help you and your organization understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Farrow, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Rob Lockwood. Rob has over 20 years' experience in cybersecurity, both the public and the private sector, as an employee and a consultant. He is currently working for a FTSE 100 company. He supports the professionalism of cybersecurity and is a member of a number of professional bodies and also a Freeman of the City of London. Rob brings these interests together in helping develop the next generation of talent in both technical and non-technical routes and promoting the benefits of a true team approach to cybersecurity. He would like to see a more integrated approach with automation of security to make it easier, quicker and more enjoyable for the defenders, while making security a normal part of all roles, i.e., getting people's behaviour to change and being more aware of the cyber threats. With most businesses reporting a skills shortage, Rob, you certainly have a serious challenge on your hands. Welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Good to be here.
Rob, cybersecurity is a very recent term. I remember talking about information security. Apart from the scale, are the challenges the same? What's the difference between cybersecurity and information security?
Yeah, the term has changed. I use it interchangeably, and also there was an additional one used in the mid-2000s called information assurance, which seems to come and go. But I think the challenges have increased. Technologies everywhere. Everyone's a user of technology. Everyone has high expectations of what the new features are going to be in the new technology and want to use those new features. Better connectivity travels with us everywhere. We want information fast and we want to be able to access services fast. So I think that's made the scale and the challenge harder. Also, our adversaries are well aware of this, and a lot of them have shifted away from more traditional forms of crime. If we think of sort of organised crime groups, moving heavily towards cyber, so that they can do things like money laundering with cryptocurrencies, so they can go after things like open banking, where we want to be able to switch banks and move money around efficiently and on the go. The bad guys, adversaries, they know that, so they're coming off after those things, and they're also trying to clean up money that they've got so that they can get their profits and hide who they are and what they're doing. So I think the challenges have definitely gone up. With the rise of technology, there's a whole lot more code that we're all using on our devices and things that sort of glue the internet together. It's an international network of networks, so there's a sort of big issue around trust and the challenges around how we establish those trusts, and that's on a sort of per country or per area, geopolitical sort of interest. So not all countries hold the same view, and so doing assurance around those things becomes a lot harder. What with that and the rise in the sort of the zero-day market, and whereas probably 20 years ago there always been 0 days, but 20 years ago we'd probably have more responsible disclosure around vulnerabilities, and we can patch our systems, keep them up to date, and try and keep some sort of level of security. I think the challenges are harder now that we're continuously changing our systems, using new code, getting code from lots of different places. Some of that might be trustworthy, some of it might not be. How we develop systems and keep releasing new versions continuously, that's become harder. The bad guys understand weaknesses in that. We've seen things like SolarWinds attack, which is a big example of, trusting our supply chain to do network management software which has been compromised. That's really hard to deal with. Also dealing with things like other 0 days that could be used against us, during times of war, or as a company, if there's a particularly sensitive thing that a threat actor wants to get to, they might use that against us. Very hard to defend against. And patching the known vulnerabilities are just increasing all the time, so it's very hard to keep up to date across a sort of a large organization. Yeah, it's a challenge.
You mentioned 0 days a few times. Could you just explain what 0 days are? And can you explain to someone that's never had the challenge of writing code why it is so difficult to write secure code?
Okay. A 0 day it's a vulnerability within software that allows somebody to do something that wasn't intended by the original developers, something that they didn't necessarily understand or foresee, but that allows somebody to potentially do something like taking control of a computer running that code. For example, a 0 day in this webcast software could be that I could send you, or you could send me, when I log on to it, some sort of component that nobody knows about, the software vendor doesn't know about, and it would exploit vulnerability on my system that would give you some potentially control over my system, from which you could gain a foothold and you could start acting as me or installing other software and doing something that was not something that I wanted. So that's an example of a 0 day.
And so why is it hard to write secure code? Is it because of the scale of it, the number of people involved? What is the fundamental problem?
Both of those things that we've known about. There are lots of different types of 0 days, but we've known about things like buffer overrun attacks since the 1970s, and we've seen various papers come out through the 1990s. There's a famous paper called Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit, if I remember correctly. And those sorts of things exist and people have known about them, but there wasn't a great deal of effort in sort of commercial software that was going to be used by lots of people to deal with some of those issues. Microsoft picked up to it in, I think, around 2004 with their software security initiative, and they've really uplifted their code. But Windows for a long time had a lot of vulnerabilities, and you'd expect a lot of people at Microsoft to be highly skilled people, right? And I'm sure they were, but focusing on thinking how code could be misused often, and that would be what we'd now term like threat modeling, and we'd embed threat modeling within software development lifecycle. That typically wasn't done before. There was a lot of software written that had to be very fast and lots of lines, so very complex, very hard to look at every different combination and understand where there might be something that you could exploit. That would potentially lead to memory sort of unsafe languages like C, C++, where you can effectively take control of, if you get control of the code and make it run in a way that wasn't intended, you can actually start overwriting other code which might be performing sort of security features, for example, within the operating system, which allow you to take control of the operating system and get access to the information, that sort of thing. So I'd say it's around complexity and trying to manage this huge code base. You've got things like interoperability issues. You've got things which need to work from the past, things like allowing, certainly in the Microsoft world, you've got a big sort of partnership with lots of different companies who they're allowed to develop sort of equipment that will work with Microsoft-based operating systems. And they would sort of build what we call drivers to allow that hardware to work with the operating system. That's very empowered software. There might be a vulnerability introduced as a result of, I don't know, using something like a Wi-Fi card on a laptop. It might have a vulnerability like if you send when you log on to a Wi-Fi router, If it was a malicious route, it could send you something really nasty that would actually take control of your machine. You just think you're connecting to a Wi-Fi access point. Some bad guy could take control of your machine. So that's a sort of, I guess, a supply chain issue as well. So again, a lot of the time these days when we build software, we buy modules, or we're rapidly developing and we buy some code that's good at doing user interfaces and some code that's good at doing different parts of what your application wants to do, and we sort of bolt it together. And as we're starting to develop more applications using APIs that are reliant on sort of cloud services, again, you're going to start to find, you could have a vulnerability introduced by linking with a new cloud service, which you might not know about. You might not see the code, you just use the service. You might have a contract that includes aspects of security, but that doesn't mean you get to audit the code or run it through the security tools that you might have embedded within your SDLC process. So, for example, there are tools which will look through static code and will say, this is a bad thing. If you write it this way, that will close out that issue. For example, buffer overflow or something like that, or in a more modern thing, a web application, what we call like an OWASP sort of finding. It might say if you write it this way or use this secure module rather than this insecure module, you'll inherit the good stuff and your code will get the thumbs up, and then you can pass it through into so it gets through to production.
Rob, clearly the genie's out of the bottle, and it's hard to think how we will ever have a fully secure internet. But the public internet didn't exist 30 years ago. With your experience, knowing what you know now, is there a single bullet that if people had done something before the internet arrived, as they were developing the internet, that it could have been made secure, or is that just a pipe dream?
Well, it's a highly complex thing that now operates across the world, right? And originally they got sort of they developed within America. There are things around packet switching were developed within the UK, National Physical Laboratory. So it's a lot of, at the time, very modern thinking to try and develop a very resilient network. But what I'd say is it assumed a lot of trust. So it assumed that the community that would use it were sort of trustworthy, and that it needed to be resilient and performant, allow people to communicate. And we're still early days in sort of, computer hardware and the development of that. The speeds around networks are very slow, so you wanted to make sure you got things reliably through the network. So it's very clever how it works, but as that built up over time, and we're talking before I was born in some of these cases, right? So I'm not claiming anything anything particular here, but if we think around things like routing protocols, that when we joined all these different networks up around the world that connect to each other and can interoperate with each other and pass information between each other, when we did things like set up the design routing protocols to interconnect those, we didn't build sort of trust in there. So there's a lot of that left opportunity for people who might want to attack a network, or by accident could impact on network, could sort of send poisoned routes out, or like routing leaks or malicious routes, so that you can redirect traffic around. So that's a trust thing, and what I'd say like an authentication thing. And they're looking at addressing that now with something called RPKI for routing, for what we call Border Gateway Protocol. That's one example. DNS, another one that we all rely upon, which I think was early 80s that was invented. But, every time we type into our browsers, connect to, Google or Microsoft or McDonald's or eBay or whatever it is, we go and resolve the IP address of the service. And I'm assuming we're talking to the correct DNS server, or that our DNS server that we do talk to can give us a trustworthy result back, we should get an IP address that we can connect to and talk to that service. Now, the problem is that we can do poisoning in DNS. So again, in the early days, that wasn't built in. It was assumed that the answer you get back is definitely the right answer, and how the bad guys could manipulate that. And since the mid-90s, there has been a standard called DNSSEC, which is deployed on the internet, but isn't deployed across the whole world and removing just the unauthenticated DNS. That's still there. There are a whole load of issues in making that work across the world because of things like, Splinternet, where you've got different countries who want to sort of control the internet for their citizens differently, or don't want to have, say, dominance from America over their DNS systems. And then when you do things like sharing cryptographic information, it allows that stuff to work. That's, who controls that? It's like, no, I want to control it. I don't want you to control it because I don't trust you. Because, say Chinese to America, there's Chinese aren't necessarily going to trust America, and America might not trust China. So that sort of thing. But in answer to your question, I think I'd say it's around trust, building trust into all of those things that we use in the internet, from routing through to resolution of IP addresses, through to being able to trust that you're actually talking to me now, and that the computer I'm talking to you through is actually my computer and somebody's not manipulating that. So device identities, those things.
So basically, we live in a fairly scary world when it comes to online security and knowing what might be going on out there, who we might be talking to, how we might be connected. What do you think is the single most important thing an individual can do to be more secure online? Because it is a bit of a dangerous place to be trading, certainly if you have cash or valuables. So what's the one thing you would tell everybody to do to make sure they are as secure as possible?
I think it would be keep your technology up to date and trust what it tells you to do. So, for example, it's not a good idea to be using a computer that's very old with an unsupported operating system. The problem becomes with the social aspects about not everyone can afford to keep buying the latest computer or the latest phone. With the mobile phone now is just a computer, right? Very powerful computer in your hand. So whether it's your laptop or whether it's your home computer or your mobile phone, try and keep that up to date. Allow it to deliver the security patches. Make sure you use the features. Well, I say it's good to keep up to date. There are new security features, new standards and alliances between some of the big sort of technology vendors that allow you to start getting better at security, and you can inherit those good things. Whereas if you buy older technology, you might not have the hardware that allows you to do that. You might not have support. You might not have continued sort of upgrades. So if you're running something like Microsoft Windows XP, you probably wouldn't get sort of defenses against 0 days when they're announced in all likelihood. So I'd say, keep up to date, keep your software up to date, don't turn off all the security features, make sure you download software from your sort of trusted repositories, like with Apple in the Apple Store, or Google on your Android. Make sure you get it from the right place. And if it warns you to do things or not to do things, then think about it. Always think before you click. There's lots of things I could come out with, but I'd say it comes down to the sort of integrity of the system that you're using and the ability for it to use the new sort of features that are evolving to try and protect us against the sort of the online threat, the bad guys.
And turning to the corporate world, Rob, when you read about someone being hacked and you probably have access to information about the root cause of that, the underlying attackers, attack vectors or whatever, what's the thing that makes you really despair? When someone gets into someone else's system because of a particular intrusion, what is the one intrusion that makes you really despair? And you hang your head and say, oh, for heaven's sake, surely they could have done better at protecting themselves against that intrusion.
Often a lot of intrusion, I'm not picking any particular company here, this is a generic thing. Often some of it's just do the cyber hygiene really well. If you're a big company, if you've got good budgets to, you understand the risk and you understand the potential impact of not managing that risk properly, you can probably invest higher. But at the minimum, do the basics very well and consistently. We've got loads of resources now. There are loads of places, sometimes too many, but it's better to have more than not enough. But you've got things like National Cyber Securities Centre in the UK. They've got the Cyber Essentials scheme for probably sort of at small and medium-sized organisations, potentially bigger, depending on who you're doing business with in government. And you've got other sort of certification sort of schemes as well. But all of those things will start with doing the basics well. So, making sure you manage user identities and access rights well, making sure you do secure configuration, use multi-factor authentication, you do things like we were talking earlier, patching, make sure you can do instant response. You can prevent, from at least from commodity malware or better. So those are the things to do. But often you find things like companies got hacked because think before you click when that phishing email comes in. They didn't, and it might be because somebody's under pressure or was actually fooled because the phishing email was so good. But you at least, need to make sure you've got good control of those things, and your users, if that happens, are trained to, contact the security ops center, for example, so they can do an incident response and sort of do containment and sort of mitigation. And of course, when you talk about suppliers, I think as well, making sure that between the parties, your significant supply chain, and making sure you understand how to talk together and pick up earlier, if you need to disconnect in some way or distance yourself in some way for another organization, know how you would communicate that and how you would share information. But I'd say a big one is phishing. Another one would be around sort of bad access permissions and passwords and so on. Companies that don't use two-factor authentication, it's pretty easy to do that now, right? So, if you hear of organizations getting hit because somebody's account got compromised or they popped up some service on the internet that wasn't protected, that had a standard default password and a remote desktop or something, it's very hard to actually say you've done the basics well, and you still hear stories about that stuff.
Is it fair to say then that most problems are sort of human rather than technical?
No, I think it's a mix. The technology really should enable us to, trustworthy computing and so on. We should be able to defend the users so they could go on about their everyday business. But we need to at least get to a baseline, say in a workplace, have a sort of campaign, and so that we make sure we get all of our users getting some basic messages within their head, so they know that we aren't in a position where email is guaranteed to be legitimate and trustworthy, or that link you send them is going to be trustworthy. It might be very trustworthy, and often you do get corporates that send links around within emails which are absolutely fine. I don't know, an HR system or something, log into your HR system. But equally, you could send somebody a link to an HR system that's fake and send them to a site to download something. So, where is the user? Silly for having done that? Well, no, not in my opinion. We need to, but we need to harden them to think about it, and also always question if you do go to that link and there's something that makes you think this doesn't look quite right. Well, don't click it. Stop and think about it. The technology hasn't prevented them going to that phishing site that looks like our HR site. They've got there, but it might be the human, the layer 8, as some people call it, the human firewall. That stops it, and at that point you can report it, and then you can update your technical defenses to stop other users going to it, that sort of thing. Some more sort of advanced corporates are probably going to pick some of that up through automation, or with their partners might have actually sort of gone and validated that link as it gets clicked and actually say something bad probably just happened, let's go and do some sort of containment, potentially notify or lock down the user for a period of time whilst we look at it, and also update the technical controls so other users who might get it don't go to it even if they do click on it. So it's a combination, technical and human, but no, it's absolutely not the fault of the human.
Thank you, Rob. You're very keen on sort of helping people develop their careers in cybersecurity, but there's so many specialisms. What advice would you give to a young person, someone say around 20, either leaving school or leaving university, considering a career in cybersecurity? How do you think they should get started?
So I think there are lots of routes. I mean, I'm well aware of what's going on in the UK, less aware around some of the other parts of the world. But if we take the UK example, I'd say that you don't necessarily have to go to university to do it, and you don't necessarily need to be technical. There are so many jobs in information cyber security that you could do, and it's a massively interesting place to enter. So you could potentially look at apprenticeship schemes, and there are lots of companies working with the UK government around apprenticeships, and with the NCSC go and talk to those companies, go to events like, I think it's Cyber First that the NCSC run, go and meet people in the industry, try and find maybe a mentor, go and be keen and ask questions. Most people will be helpful. We're really trying to get new people into the industry from a sort of diverse range of people, not, as I say, not just computer scientists. That's just one part of the problem. We need people who can deal with psychology, who can deal with sort of business interfacing and understanding the bigger issues and how we manage risk and so on. Not where a lot of that isn't technical, sort of 0-day sort of stuff, right? So go and meet those people, engage, work out, do you need to go to university to do it? Well, if we look back 20 years ago, often jobs in information security cybersecurity looked for a master's degree. And I mean, those times are long gone. There are loads of people in the industry now who don't even have degrees, and some of them are absolutely amazing. And you couple those with people who might have got a particular technical specialism, who need to look at the technical issues within security, and you get like amazing results. So I would say work out if you want to go to uni. If you do, well, you could go to something like the NCSC website and look up the various different universities that have been certified, so you know you're getting good quality from your investment in your education. Or you could look up for apprenticeship opportunities, and there are companies like BT, a whole host of other companies that will give you amazing opportunities, and they'll get you on a structured development plan, and they'll take you through a process. Some of those processes you can end up with a degree, but I don't believe that has to be the the thing that comes out of it. But lots of routes, work out what you want to do, go and mix with people. There's an open source community, certainly within London. You've got things like the OWASP groups. You get things like the B-Sides conference, which is free every year. Go and mix and talk.
Finally, Rob, what are the 2 or 3 things that you know now that you would have loved to have known when you started your career in cybersecurity?
How busy it was going to get. Again, I mean, I personally have covered a lot of different roles within security and different industries as well. So again, it's hard to understand that if you've not worked in it before, but it is a massive sort of community of practitioners out there who cover different things. So for example, you get people who focus on cyber behaviors and security awareness, develop sort of campaigns to engage the workforce and the supply chain and make it interesting and real for them. I mean, that's fascinating stuff. You get people who are doing penetration testing, who are trying to break into the systems for the bad guys do, so we know where the problems are and we can close them. You get people who do come from developer backgrounds who understand how to build security checks within the development process so that we release strong hardened code. You get incident responders who actually, they're there for when that incident happens. Somebody spots the incident, there's a security ops team, it's another role. And then the people who deal with the incident, the business impact assessment, the communication, the various tiered incident response processes. So I would never imagined how big it was, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting to go into lots of those areas. Number 3, it was hard when I started to understand where technology was going to take us. In the year 2022, it's amazing, and it makes our lives extremely simple and efficient, and we're all connected, and can collaborate real time with each other and stuff. But now with that and the rate of change, we have, I think, become there's a bigger attack surface, and it's harder to keep up with that. So we can make sure that we've got the right sort of risk management in place, and we can describe what that actually is at any one time. That bit, and of course the executive layers within the companies want to know that now. They don't want to hear the technical things, and it's at one of the challenges, being able to say, where are we? Where are our most significant risks? And have we got the right sort of baseline, and the really important risks, have we got them under control, and to be able to articulate that. So I'd say I wouldn't have anticipated where it has gone to now, but it's got the full focus of executive teams, Richard, as I'm sure your community of executives that you mix with will probably talk to you whenever you see them.
Yeah, it is a hot topic. Rob, Many thanks for finding the time to talk to me. I know you got an incredibly busy day job. Fascinating catching up and hearing about the challenges we have in cybersecurity, and thank you for sharing some tips and insights into what you know. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. Great talking with you.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.